The Gilded Age, as Mark Twain called it, was in the late 19th century. A glittering time of fortune and wealth on the outside, but poor and corrupt under the surface. This was a time for growth, for industries and huge swarms of immigrants flooding the United States. New inventions and discoveries were made, and trains and railroads were built. All of these things helped the Gilded Age progress into a widely known era. However, beneath this age of progression, much corruption led to large-scale segregation, notably in the form of workers. Many groups were discriminated against, and as a result, much pain and suffering was felt for what was, in reality, the backbone of America. Among the groups segregated were Asians, African Americans, Irish, and Catholics.
The African American community, although technically freed by the 13th Amendment, were still vastly disadvantaged, being mostly illiterate and unskilled.
Get that, boy!
Many former slaves went back to exactly what they were doing in the antebellum era, but with a small salary. This was known as sharecropping.
Get back to work! Get back here!
In sharecropping, blacks chose to work for the white man, as opposed to slavery where they were being forced. But essentially, it was the same thing. Jim Crow laws were instituted to keep blacks segregated, and the principle of separate but equal was never quite equal.
Across the continent, Asians were used for the rapidly expanding railroad industry. China was certainly the biggest area fueling the Pacific immigrant drive. With an expanding population and Western jobs expanding just as fast, the Asian workforce exploded. Not only were the Chinese physically different, but their culture was vastly different from the capitalist Americans they were working for. Treated just as poorly as their New England and Southern counterparts, Asians were wildly underrepresented in unions and had little influence in how they were managed.
On the East Coast, Irishmen were also ostracized by their co-workers on the railroad. Then again, they were Irish. In all seriousness, though, the Irish were often attacked and abused by their co-workers and employers. However, the Irish were Anglo-Saxon, meaning the people didn't care as much as if they were Chinese.
At this time, America was mostly Protestant, so when new religions like Judaism or Roman Catholicism arrived, those who practiced these religions were persecuted heavily.
So remember the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about writing a play about that.
Oh, hey guys. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Catholic. Why does everybody hate me?